Hello, this is Rodney Anonymous of the Dead Milkmen. You're listening to the Nothing Shocking podcast. This, of course, does count as community service, so that's good. Tell the judge you fulfilled your community service.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking podcast, a non-genre based, all ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dog Bowl Studios is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on Twitter at NoShockPod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Ragged Records, located in downtown Rock Island, Illinois, and downtown Davenport, Iowa. We'd like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. Tonight's guest is
Rodney Anonymous from the Dead Milkmen.
Yeah, promoting the new anticipated album from the Dead Milkmen, Quaker City Quiet Pills.
Yeah.
So if you get on the Dead Milkmen website right
Pre-order.
now, yeah, you can get it all pre-ordered, and it'll be at your home by June 9th. So, Hey, great, hilarious interview.
Yeah, he was funny.
Let's get to it, man.
All right, good night.
Good night. Rodney, welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'd like to introduce you to my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Did you get the package I sent? You know, the one with the oregano inside? Oh.
I think you missed that one.
I always let people know. They say, like, how are you doing? It's my usual. I'm like, my usual grouchy self. And then that way I can find out if they thought they were going to talk to Joe or not. Because people get us confused, and they'll be like, I get a couple minutes into an interview, and they're like, oh shit, this is the grouchy one. It's not the one that sang on Punk Rock Girl. And then they'll try to back out of it. And a few years back, I stopped doing like interviews for a while, but a few years back, there was somebody I was doing a podcast type interview, and they were like, excuse me, but you're not the one who sang on Punk Rock Girl, are you? And I'm like, no, that was Joe. And the guy, they were honest. They're like, yeah, we actually had wanted to talk to him, but we got mixed up. So I said, well, Joe is actually right here. Do you want me to put him on? Which he wasn't. And they're like, yeah. And I started just talking like a pirate, like, arr, eat Joe, arr, arr. And this went on for about 10 minutes or so. And they just figured that Joe talked like a pirate in regular life. And then I just couldn't keep up the pirate voice for much longer. I had to work the next day.
Well, so yeah.
I had to tell them, I'm like, oh no, Joe's ship is coming or something.
All right, let's get this thing started, Rodney. You ready? With the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions lifted, what's in the works?
They are?
Well, I guess they just announced it officially. Was it yesterday? Or I saw
that's a terrible idea. People are going to go out every time in Philadelphia. We suffered. We have like 100-year history of pandemics. But we go back to the 1920s.
Yeah. Right.
And whenever they would lift the restrictions in the 20s, people would start keeling over. So they actually, at one point, every Philadelphian can tell you about the 1921 They used to call it the Spanish flu, but then they found out it started in Kansas, so we used to call it the Kansas flu here. But no, for real, really did. I'm not joking about that. We know now it started in Kansas, but it started. They had a big bond parade here, and they told people, "Don't go to this." And people went, and like the next day, the hospitals were every time they start lifting restrictions on something, Philadelphians just like pop on a mask and go inside. Just wait for the rest of the country to keel over. But all right, so yes, you were talking about them lifting the restrictions.
Yeah, so I guess what's in the works for the Dead Milkmen. I know we have some new material to talk about, but let's talk about the summer season. Are there going to be some live shows for you guys? Just kind of give us the spiel.
I think there's at least one in the summer, and it'll be outdoors. So people can go to that one without fear. And then I think there's some other stuff, but I think theirs might be outdoors too. I'm never too keen on the other stuff because I think one of the other things, and the rest of the band must hate me because I never want to play anything. And I think one of them is like a nostalgia type show. I don't know what I can legally say, and another one's a big fair out somewhere in the Midwest. But I generally don't like leaving South Philadelphia, so it's or I just don't like leaving Philadelphia generally. But I think there will be at least one in Philadelphia, and it's getting harder and harder to find places to play in Philadelphia. So it's we're kind of restricted at this point to rodeos, craft fairs. A lot of people doing things with yarn and pottery, that sort of thing.
Well, I know a lot of bands we've talked to. They're just like couldn't believe they'd ever be playing in casinos. Have you guys done that yet? No,
I don't think I would do that. I'm not a big fan of casinos. First of all, because you can never win. There's no, the house always wins, and I find them horrendously depressing.
Yes.
But I find everything horrendously depressing.
But they got some
literally. Yeah, there's nothing children's birthday parties I find depressing. Rainbows, sunshine, all depressing me.
What's in the works with a new recorded material for the Dead Milkmen? Can you kind of spill the beans on that a little bit?
I was hoping I wouldn't have to talk about that because I'm the worst person in the world to go to and say, hey, like when I was young and I used to spitefully or hate read Rolling Stone, it was all the same thing. They would ask these musicians, what are you up to? It's like, well, new album is out. I double track this guitar with a 12-string on. And I just say, no, when I get older, I never want to talk about that. And plus, for me, all the fun is, and I'm sorry to be going a million miles an hour on this, but it's really good to vent and download. And sometimes this is cheaper than going to see a shrink. But actually, I was seeing a shrink for a while, but then he graduated me, and I think I was like, you're good. I never want to see you again. I'm like, okay, fine. But for me, all the fun is writing songs and making the demos, and then as you go along it gets progressively less fun, and then you find yourself having to talk about the album, and it's like, oh, I just spent 2 years of my life I know a lot of people love talking about their albums because I think it's probably their source of income, or they it's just their thing. It's it's like somebody has a baby. Here, take a look at these pictures of my baby. Here's my baby's placenta. Here's a cast I made of my baby's head. But here are my baby's X-rays. But for me, it's just oh, okay, yeah, I did this thing, and if people like it, that's fine. If they don't, here's a dozen other albums I can tell you about from other people. So yeah, if you want to ask me questions about it, I will truthfully answer them, which is better because a lot of people are trying to sell you their album. Whereas me, you buy it, you buy it.
Is there? Do you have some information though to give your fans and our listeners about new Dead Milkmen material? Is it on the horizon?
There's a new single that came out today. See, now I'm doing the thing. Oh, now I sound like I'm being like one of the people in Rolling Stone when I was young. Oh, a new single out today. I'm hoping to tour Europe. There was a new single that came out today. And then I can tell you that. That's and I think I don't even know the name of the online magazine that had it. Hang on, let me check. Let me go over here because everybody else was sending me stuff from it today. This is how terrible I am. It was on. I just had that here. It was on Consequences of Sound.
Okay.
I remember that now. Yeah, and they had the single. But yeah, for me, it's I I'm glad, that there are other people in the band that are much better at promoting stuff than I am. I always think if I start promoting stuff, I'm going to sound like Vince from ShamWow. Hi, I'm Vince from Sham. I don't know. He's still big with the young people or not.
Fair enough.
Wait, fun fact. Vince from ShamWow was declared a suppressive person by the Church of Scientology, and I'm not making that up.
I guess you learn something new every day.
Yeah, unless you're me.
Jeff's got the next one for you.
Well, you said you wrote, I think I read that you wrote the tracks for this new album, 3 years span over between 2019 and 2022. How many tracks did you guys actually write?
Did I write, or well, we all sort of write. I don't like to be the sort of person that goes, well, I wrote all the songs, even if we all know I did write all the songs. How many? I think there were like 13 on it. It's so weird. Like, I know so little about my album, but the thing is, or our album, my album. Now I'm turning into Roger Waters. God. Yeah, I believe it's kind of short. It's because it was done in bits and pieces, and it's weird because I approved a lot of not approved because I don't get much of a vote, but I've seen all the album art and everything. There's some back and forth on number. So let's just say 12 to 13 tracks. Although I prefer to have like 18 to 20 tracks on a record. So I'm usually like, let's just keep going and make some more songs and throw them on there. But
well, fair enough.
This is probably the most vague thing anybody has ever been about something they've done.
I would agree with you.
Yeah, it is, because it's like most other people can tell you, like, again, they're like, well, let me tell you, we went to this studio in the south of France and recorded for 26 hours on this day, and I know people can tell you the name of the guy that brought in the bottled water and all that, and I'm just like, look, I see, this is why I would be a terrible parent, because I was there to make the kid, and I started losing interest as it went along, and by the time the kid would be in kindergarten, I would be completely like, what's his name? I don't remember.
Wanted to cover a little bit with you about We Don't Need This Fascist Groove thing. You guys covered that track in 2020. Can you talk a little bit more about the? You guys did a great job of covering this song. Heaven 17. You made it your own, but you still kind of kept true to the song's origins. Can you talk a little bit more about the covering of that song?
Yeah. This is something I do know about, because that stomping sound, I made that by putting cat litter on a piece of plywood in my basement and stomping on it with my boots, and I was really happy with how that came out. But I love Heaven 17, and I loved very early Human League. I have nothing against later Human League, but Replication was just an album made by people living in a steel town. So when I was young, I liked that a lot. Big fan of Martin Ware's, and then I was discussing covering it with a friend of mine, and he's like, oh, I have Martin Ware's number, let me give him a call. And I was like, if you call him now and you have Martin Ware on the phone and you put that up, I put that up to my ear, I will shit my pants. I will totally shit my pants. I could not, I get overwhelmed talking to people who I listened to when I was young. So basically we contacted him, and there was a little bit of a lyric change in there that we had to modernize it. And Martin's like, look, you can't change the lyrics. And I understand that, because if you change the lyrics, if you let somebody do that, anybody can do it.
Right.
So because I'm overly paranoid or overly very type A, whenever I'm in a studio, I get what's called an impulse. For those of you users listeners who don't do this sort of thing, I'll usually have Dean hit a snare drum, and I get that sound on a recording device, usually a little Zoom recorder. Mm-hmm. And then what I do is I have, when I get home, I have a thing called a convolution reverb. So I put that in there, so that gives me the sound of the studio. So if I have to overdub anything, I can do that, and it sounds like I'm in the studio. So I did that, and that worked and nicely, and I was very happy with that. But then I screwed up, and I gave a quote to Rolling Stone, something I said I would never do. If you haven't picked up on the theme of my lifelong troubles with Rolling Stone, I just didn't feel like getting bitched at by people. So I was just like, I'm like, okay, I'll give Rolling. So I gave them like the most beige wallpaper quote that I could possibly give them, like, song good, me wear hat or something like that. I don't know. And then I went on. I think I complained about the guitar solo on the B side because I'm a horrible person. So.
Oh, fair enough.
I was reading in the bio I read on the new album that there was like a song that I can't remember which member wrote it, Astral Dad, and they said it came with the idea like you throwing out, okay, write a song about this. How's the band dynamic work with writing songs? Is that something you guys do a lot? You just throw out ideas and then start writing a song?
It usually happens between Joe and myself because Joe will feign writer's block. Or Joe will have a solo album that he's working on. It's more important than the Milkmen. So he needs ideas that he can do for the Milkmen thing. And so I was we have a song on the album called God Wrote Come Junkie, for example. Joe and I usually are the first two to arrive at practice, and then Dan and Dean arrive a bit later. So Joe and I usually set up stuff, and we've known each other since we were in our very early teens. And we are really good at sort of amusing each other.
Yeah.
That sounds filthy. I don't like something you see on Cinemax in the 90s. Like, starring Teresa Russell, who should have had more of a career. But we amuse ourselves sometimes. So there's a song I'm called God Wrote Come Junkie because Joe and I were discussing the horrible song I Write the Songs, which isn't a Barry Manilow song. Some guy who has this sort of history with the band Chicago and the Beach Boys had written that. And Joe was looking up on his phone something about it, and he goes, oh, it's not egotistical. The guy's saying that God writes the songs. So I was like, are you telling me that God wrote the Torturers? And then so he basically said I had a problem with that. And then he was saying he was out of ideas or something. And I pitched to him the idea of a somebody who was sort of new agey and crystally. And this guy was the Astral Dad, and he convinced his family that he had astral projected away, or the mother, or he just basically left. He went to go sell crystals in Sedona, and then the mother convinced the kids that he was astral projecting, out into the world to help fight poverty and stuff, when instead he just ran out in the family. And then Joe, being Joe and not being as dark as I am, actually changed it to where he astral projects around the universe, making people happy. So
that's awesome.
Oh, very cool.
I have this dark cloud over my head. Joe's really good at avoiding it. He's really good at saying, no, dark cloud's not coming over me today.
Well, I talk a little bit about the band's past. As the Dead Milkmen have released 10 studio albums since 1985.
That's too many.
Well, I don't think it's enough
really,
myself.
There's no need for that many albums. Probably condense those into a couple of singles. Be a good idea. Well, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm often surprised by the history of the band. I'm like, what? When did that happen?
Well, how did you and the rest of your bandmates in the Milkmen, how did you guys evolve as songwriters? Or has it always just been the same way since the band's inception? Or have you guys, I guess maybe matured as songwriters as time's gone by?
I don't know if I've matured. I write a lot of songs. We all have different methods. First of all, everybody writes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And there are no individual credits, which is good because you cannot be in a band of 4 people and not. You might think you had an idea that was your idea, but the truth is somebody in the van gave you the kernel for that idea.
Yeah.
They just put that. Joe writes songs whenever he feels like it. I know that. Dean may be kind of like me. I think Dan falls into the Joe camp where he kind of plays around with something. I have a friend named Carl who's in a band called Angel Spit, and a very disciplined, very hardworking musician. And he taught me something that I do every week. Every week on Sunday, I do something called church. And we call it church because you tell people, don't bother me, I'm in church. And you get all prepared and you start working on some music. And it's great because you work on it for a while on Sunday. And there are a lot of rules. No alcohol. You can have tea. Basically, I've got a bunch of sort of electric candles or whatever they're called, flameless candles. Mm-hmm. And I have those usually going. It gives me a nice atmosphere in here in the studio. And I just... I will write, and it makes me happy. It's very relaxing. And if you do that, usually can come up with like a song a month. So by the end of the year, there's your album if you want like a 12-song album. It was one of the smartest things that I'd ever heard another musician say. And the bar is pretty low there because, your average musician, you gotta go down to like a paramecium or a flatworm to find something dumber. But my friends are very smart. So Carl was very smart, and he said, do this. And I started doing it, and it's a way for me. Now, sometimes I'm not writing a song. Sometimes I've got a piece of equipment that I want to delve a little bit into more. Or sometimes, but Sunday is spent in the studio several hours just saying, all right, this is church, and I've got to get some work done. So that's how I go about writing.
Oh,
so
nice.
I'm hoping that's matured. I hope I've matured as a songwriter, but, time will tell.
I guess the proper wording for it would be a more responsible songwriter now?
Yeah, I think that what happens is people pay for things. I have a very hardcore sort of work ethic. I don't drink before a show, and if I'm playing the next night, I won't drink that night. What I do is I usually wait till we've got a bunch of shows in a row somewhere. I usually wait till the last one, and I say, okay, where's the best sort of goth industrial club you have in this town? And I go there and I get hammered, or as close to hammered as I can afford, mildly buzzed, I guess. But I think people are paying you to do stuff. Mm-hmm. People are paying. They're going to pay for your album. They're going to pay to see you live. And ripping people off is not cool. And I've seen so many bands and people would encourage this behavior. They come out on stage drunk. Yeah. They could barely find their way around their instruments. They're like, well, that's really cool. And I'm like, hey, no, it's not what I paid to hear their songs. I didn't pay, to see them puke on stage, unless it's Gigi Allen, in which case you do pay to see the late Gigi on stage. I went to see him once, and he threw feces like a foot or two from me.
It was like every Gigi show toward the end was always throwing feces or doing something ridiculous like that.
The Jonas Brothers ripped him off. Like, you're going to see the Jonas Brothers now, they're flinging shit at the audience and everything. Like, you guys ripped off Gigi.
I just got done watching one of his documentaries, and I didn't realize that they had to take his headstone down at the cemetery because people were pooping and peeing all over it all the time. Did you realize that?
No, I didn't know that. We knew his manager, or his former manager, and we were in we were playing a club, and the club had gotten us dinner at this fairly nice restaurant, and his manager was sitting here. It was like in the Blues Brothers, where they're like, how much for the wife, the little girl? It was like that. He was telling this story about them burying Gigi in a jockstrap and Gigi leaking out and all this, and these people are like moving away from their tables. I had seen the one documentary called Hate It, which was on Tubi,
yes,
which has ads, and this is the greatest thing ever. My wife and I were laughing so hard, we had tears coming out of our eyes. They do a little ad break on Tubi, and it's for diarrhea medication. Yeah. Like, this is the greatest day of our lives. Might as well just check out now, because it doesn't get better than this.
Well, the one documentary that I just watched with him, when Gigi was pretty much narrated, and it went through Merle, telling the story and through their mother, and so that's how it kind of. And I think it might be on Netflix or Hulu or something. But anyway, Jeff, you got the next question.
You probably answered this question a million times, but take us back to Philadelphia in 1983. What was the punk rock scene or rock scene like back then when you guys got started?
It was very different than any other punk rock scene. I didn't go to see other punk rock scenes, but as I got older and heard about other punk rock scenes, it was very, very different. Because other punk rock scenes were very homogeneous. They had a sound. Yeah. So the DC sound, or you have the sort of New York type of like Cro-Mags, like really hard sound and stuff like that, or you get your LA sound. And Philly was very eclectic. We would put like, all right, here's a punk rock band, but we're also going to throw a rockabilly band on this list. Oh, here's a poet. We had like Eldridge Knight come out and read. They were very weird shows, because it was just it's always a very weird town. And we never really know what we're doing, which is the best thing about living here. So the scene, I found out later on, we were really lucky, because we could have bands that were sort of sort of hardcore, but also a little bit psychedelic, like the Electric Love Muffin. We have these really amazing speedcore bands like FOD, and we before that had been one of the best bands in the world in the early sort of Philly scene was a band called the Stickmen. They were like a no-wave band. So that was the band that we were all in awe of. And then we have bands like D-Control, who are still around, an amazing straight-up punk band. FOD are still around. It's amazing how many of these bands are still around. It's frightening, actually. Something should be done about it. Laws should be passed. Petitions will be signed. Laws will be passed.
Oh, very good. This is a big question, so spare me.
Sure.
The Dead Milkmen released their debut album, Big Lizard in My Backyard, back in 1985. My 8th grade year / freshman year in high school. To this day, that album still has this has held this underground following to it. And when you guys were recording this album, did you ever feel or ever know that, hey, you guys were onto something here that was going to hold the test of time with, I guess, young punk rockers all the way up until 30, 40 years later? How can you kind of give us the spiel on that?
We kind of knew in Philly because people liked it, and there had been a little bit of bands coming in from outside who were rather sort of dour and stuff. I remember people were yelling because we were playing a punk show and people were smiling, and there's a guy running through the crowd yelling at people for smiling during a punk show. And I always thought, if you're going to have some sort of revolution, there should be a certain amount of smiling in it. Most failed revolutions, if you look at the pictures from them, there's no smiling. Even when they break out the guillotine, there should be some smiling. So I always said there's no use in being in a band unless you set out to be the biggest band in the world. I don't mean that financially. I just mean that I had goals of somebody will hear this and relate to it, and it'll make them feel better. And that's my idea of being the biggest band in the world. If you set your sights to that sort of thing, then you're going to be fine. So I'll bump into people. I had a really good day on Saturday. And that's not because I drank a whole bunch of these things called pickletinis, but I did. They're pickles. It's a combination of potato vodka, pickle juice, olive juice, and then they have pickles and olives in them. I drank about many of them, but I kept bumping into people that day who were very complimentary and nice and saying that music, the stuff we did helped get them through. When they were young, when they thought there was sort of nobody else out there. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of my reward, and that makes me happy. So that put me in a really good mood, but also the booze probably helped.
I guess another thing that really was eye-opening, the simple marketing of Big Lizard in My Backyard. There was just, even in our area, tons of teenage kids, punk rock kids, wearing Big Lizard in My Backyard T-shirts. It just amazed me how it just caught on like it did. It was just so simple, a yellow T-shirt. And
the weird thing is, there was no marketing really on our part. When we first put the album out, we were signed to a record label because the big company wanted another band that was signed to that label. And the guy who owned the label we were on said, well, if you take the bigger band, you got to take the Dead Milkmen. And they were like, so we went out to California, and oh man, what a nightmare that first trip was. We make it across the country, and it's one bad experience after another. Our manager had booked the tour through Maximum Rock and Roll, through Scene Reports.
Yes.
And so
yes.
you would get to a town and you find out that the person who was running the show was only 16 years old, and you couldn't have the show because he got like a C in social studies. And I was like, oh, okay. So we get out to California and we go to the to Restless Records, which was the parent company, and they kind of gave us the bum's rush. I think they had somebody watch us because I think they were afraid we were going to steal stuff. And then while we were out there, they started playing the songs on college radio. And so, within a week, well, because we were still stuck out there, they're like, hey, come on back in, take what you want, So they shouldn't have said that to me because I took office supplies. I didn't know they meant records. I'm like, oh, cool, copier machine. This will look good. But we did that, and then when we were out there, we were being booked. They weren't paying a lot of attention to us. So at one point they booked us in 2 different clubs at the same time. That's just like what life was life. And this life before, I can't imagine, and I know I did it for most of my career, but I'm trying to remember what life was like on the road without cell phones or computers, or, because you'd have to drive for a while. And then sometimes you'd have to make a phone call from a payphone, which means you had to whip out the quarter box. I don't know how many people remember those. Exactly. And, ka-ding, hey, all right. And then you would go and make your phone call and find out, okay, well, we're going to be there at this time. And, people were always surprised that we were on time, because that's not a thing that happens, I guess, a lot in rock and roll. So, there was the first tour, the fact that we stuck with it after that. But then there weren't a lot of, when we came back, everybody was really happy because we were sort of the first Philly punk band that went out and did like a nationwide tour, and it gave everybody else hope that they could go out, because they were like, well, if you guys can do it, we can do it. And we're like, well, that's what we've been telling you. We have been telling you that if we can play our instruments, you can play our instruments better. If we can tour, you can tour better.
Very good. Jeff, you got the next one?
Well, yeah, some of our listeners may or may not know that you had a side project band for a while, Burn Witch Burn. Can you tell us a little bit about that band and the origins of it?
Oh, yeah, I have a big affinity for, and again, this is another weird thing, because I was listening to a podcast today where they were talking about Sinead O'Connor, who I feel really bad for, because everybody got angry at her for tearing up a picture of the Pope. But I mean, the Pope was running like a child molester factory. So I mean, it's just I'm just saying she's not the villain in that. But I have I like a lot of her Irish music. I have a big affinity for Irish music, gypsy music, that sort of stuff. Any Scottish music, anything from if you bust out Playford's Dance Master, I am in the pit. I'm a madman. So we had that band with my friend Wild Bill, my friend Steve, who's since passed away, who was the person most like me I've ever been in a band with. My friend Todd, we had a friend Brett in it, but and my wife was in it, Vienna. And the reason we don't have it anymore, my wife's a brilliant singer, brilliant violin player, but she had stage fright, and she would have to pound down a few. She'd have to have a few piccoltinis before going. And finally, she confessed to me that she had stage fright and she didn't like going out there. And so I said, well, okay, we don't have to have a band. We don't have to do this. And then I told everybody I fired her. And then for the longest time, people were like, don't mess with him. He fired his wife. But I did not fire her. She quit, and I guess you give my friend Wild Bill a call, because I really miss him. Brilliant mandolin, bouzouki, guitar player.
Oh, very good. Rodney Anonymous in the present is a blogger with what tells how to live, and then you're also a radio show host on the Why Not Radio.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit more on your journey into journalism of sorts?
Oh, no, journalism I started many years back. Actually, I think the last sort of journalist job I had, I don't remember Deadspin or not. It used to be like a sports thing. I used to review fights at concerts for them. And that was the most fun in the world. They would send me footage of a fight that broke out at a concert, and I would review that. I wrote for a while for a thing called the Philadelphia City Paper, where we used to have a contest. If whoever got the most death threats that week would win a prize, and I would always win. I would always get the most death threats. And then, let me see, the journalism thing, something like that, the Tells You How to Live, I do the radio show now, which is weird because it's a very dark radio show on like an indie pop station. So, it's like, it's several days out of the month, like let's say 29 days out of the month, it's like, here's Vampire Weekend and LCD Sound System. And then they're like, well, okay, well, it's Friday night now, and like, here comes Rodney with like Caustic and Ego Likeness and stuff like that. So I don't know how many people keep listening into my show. I would love to find that out, because I've been doing it for like a decade, but I'm also afraid to ask that question. Or what these people think also, because like, they're listening to stuff like Panda Bear and stuff like that, and then all of a sudden like my show comes on and it's like someone like screaming. I can't imagine like the transition from like Panda Bear to Bestial Mouths. Like, what happens to these people when they hear Bestial Mouths? Are they hiding under the bed? Or
Fair enough.
Well, I think you alluded earlier in pre-interview. You kind of talked about bands you're listening to now. What can you fill us in on? What other kind of music do you listen to? And maybe some of that, is there a Celtic rock band or anything you listen to?
I haven't been listening to a lot of Celtic music lately. I tend to listen to a lot of dark wave, goth industrial, that sort of stuff. There's it's one person, but the band is called, and I didn't even know this was a Philadelphia reference, out of, I believe, Scotland, or not Scotland, actually, out of the same town that, not Manchester, but a town much like Manchester, the town that the Human League were out, but Randolph and Mortimer is a new album out. It's absolutely fantastic. There's all sorts of great stuff hiding out there. That you people need to discover. Let me think. I'm just pulling something up here. I'm cheating a little bit. Just looking off the last album thing and seeing or the last show and seeing who really kind of blew me away. Kill Shelter's really super good. And I'm just trying to see if there's anything. Oh, the Permanent Daylight one, that was good. Yeah, so I tend to listen. Oh, Bricks. I tend to keep my ear out because it's people think, oh, you're interested in music. I'm like, no, I'm looking over my shoulder and seeing who's catching up. Years ago, when Youth Code began to break, I was real, because you see, like, you think you're good, and you see somebody like Sarah from Youth Code, and she's like slamming the mic into her head, and she's just this ball of angry energy. And I'm like, wow, I've got to watch my back. So I spend a lot of time, people think I'm being friendly, but large chunks of time are again spent watching my back and thinking, what can I steal from this young person? what bit of, what stage movement or bit of banter or clever lyric can I swipe from this young person?
Oh, very good. Well, we're kind of getting close to our allotted time, but I have one last question for you. I ask this to all the guests. The mystery of rock and roll is kind of gone now with the dawning of the internet and social media and what have you. For you, the artist and also the fan, what do you prefer? This new accessibility to artists now with the social media and obviously I emailed you through an email address that I found.
Yeah.
Or do you miss the that mystique? Where's your preferences?
I do not miss the mystique. When I was young, you would not believe the hoops you had to jump through to find out just what the Dead Boys looked like, let alone get a hold of their music. Yeah. You had to walk down to the magazine store and get a copy of Cream.
Yes.
And hope that they just to find out like what the cars look like, because none of this music was really on the radio, so you would hear about it from somebody's older brother, who may have been in reform school for a while, or some kid would get sent to reform school, and his mom would sell. That was the greatest, like a bonanza. His mom would sell his albums. Like, these are the albums that turned my son against Jesus. And they'd be in a big box out front lawn while he's off somewhere, and you just go and start, this is good. This looks interesting. I think, like, I used to get Black Sabbath albums. That was a big one, from people who had to go to reform school or Christian summer camp. And their parents were like, either giving it all away or selling it, which I thought was kind of odd. If you think this screwed your kid up, why are you putting it back on the secondary market? I don't know. But no, I like everything. I was listening to the Patty Duddy interview that you guys had.
Oh yes.
And first of all, he sounds so friendly, but like I like that. I like the fact that I can just dial up somebody, and hear what they're talking about, and because there was no access, and people, like I say, even before MTV, people didn't know what people looked like. I was telling the story. I've told it a bunch of times, but I really like the band Living Colour. And we did a bunch of shows with them. Super nice people. And they were opening for the Rolling Stones here in Philly. And the audience had no idea they were African American. None whatsoever. So there's this. Philly's like a mixture of really cool people and the occasional sort of backwards racist type. And this guy kept just a couple rows back more was, you could hear him. He's like, man, I'm just here to see Living Colour. That's my band. But he had, and then they came out, and you could see him on the big Jumbotron or whatever, and he realized they were African American, and it was a learning moment for him. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, what the, and you can see like the little clicking in there, and I'm sure he eventually became a better person, for realizing that the band he liked was for people that he would normally not hang out with. I mean, you could kind of tell he would normally. I'm leaving little bits out about his personality. So that and the guy at the Amanda Palmer show who thought that she would sound like the Georgia Satellite. He was the most disappointed person I ever met in my life. But generally, that's a real story too. But yeah, before I prefer this because I listen to podcasts all the time, and that's the thing. So I work from home, and I have podcasts on regularly, and a lot of the podcasts I listen to a lot of news and history podcasts, literature podcasts, but I also listen to a ton of music podcasts, and it's very interesting to me, particularly as a musician I don't know, or from a genre I'm not familiar with. I will listen to that because it's always fascinating to get an insight into that world. And you didn't get that before, when all the walls were up.
Right.
You got what was fed to you, and that's the thing. And for a long time, I mean, there was music that you didn't get to hear because that was, I mean, a lot of music is restricted now, and you're not going, there are, Lloyd Kaufman from, who does the Trauma stuff, the Toxic Avenger and all that stuff.
Yes.
I once saw an interview with him, and he was talking about Napster, and he said the music industry isn't really as much concerned about protecting the rights of Metallica as they are from keeping you from finding a band that you'll like better than Metallica. And I keep that in my mind all the time. I realize that, there are these very popular bands, and there's an entire industry that keeps other bands off of TV, off of the radio. And so I think that eventually we'll find a way to crack that code and start letting stuff seep through.
And it's funny that you say that. I have believed that my entire life without actually hearing it from somebody in the industry. I really do. There are just a ton of bands out there that are much better than the ones of the popular culture, but they never get to see the light of day.
Right.
No, they never get to see the light of day. Just try to write a song about economic justice. That's the big thing that frightens you. We'll try to write a song about raising the living wage. That will never. You could write a song about going out with a spear gun and just shooting that through babies' heads, and that would be on the radio before anything about raising everybody up to a living wage or something like that. There's just this big wall in place, and it's bad, but I think there's hopefully people will begin to find a way around it. I had a lot of hope for Bandcamp, which was recently bought out by the one gaming company. I thought Bandcamp was a wonderful way to get people to So I'm hoping that stays as good as it was. But I thought Bandcamp was a bit of an equalizer.
Well, we had Dweezil Zappa.
I check out a lot of stuff on Bandcamp.
Yeah, we had Dweezil Zappa on a couple of years ago, Jeff? Yeah. Is that right? A couple of years ago?
Yeah.
And he was starting up this rewardmusic.com thing, and where you could, it was basically with the same, explain to him what that was. You were better fluent with it than I am.
Well, it was a long time ago, but it was something similar to that where you put your music out there, but you have subscriptions and there's different levels, more stuff the more higher up the level you go.
And it was also, you could sell merch on there and what have you. It was just like an all in one type of source, but I don't know if it's still going or not. But anyway,
I think digital access scared the shit out of record companies. I think that's why you saw that sort of engineered return to vinyl, which was definitely not a grassroots movement. That was record companies saying, well, we need to find a way to, people are sharing files and we need to find a way to control it. Let's tell them all that vinyl is the greatest thing ever, and they will buy into that. I'm obviously not a fan of vinyl. So.
Fair enough. We're out of our allotted time. Is there anything that we left off tonight that you would like to discuss or promote or plug or anything like that?
You will be hearing from my lawyer.
Fair enough.
Just expect that call. Now, he sounds like a pirate. So, now, you can't be killed in Rodney. That's not me impersonating Joe. No, that's my lawyer.
Fair enough. This is how it's going to work out. We're about 3 weeks behind on our episodes, but as soon as Jeff gets it all cleaned up, we'll send you a link to the episode, and please share it wherever you can.
I do. I look forward to it. Thank you, gentlemen. I really enjoyed this.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rodney.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Take care.
I really appreciate it.
We'll be in touch with you about 3 weeks.
Terrific. All right.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
bites their tongue and pays their bills instead. Hide in the spotlights, fight the grip of death. You can have the air you need, but you best not take one breath. Hey. Roll the dice. Take your chances. Everybody knows the game is fixed, there is no prize. Everybody pulls the plug and says their last goodbyes. Move to the sunshine, fight the grip of nights. If they ever take from you